Hello and welcome to the Child Careware Minnesota Legislative Update for Tuesday, April 8th. This is for activity through Friday, April 4th. And it was quite a week. As noted before, this was the deadline for all policy bills to be heard in both the House and the Senate committees to which they were referred. So the schedule got quite busy. What I'm going to do is a summary of a few categories of bills for you, because the big focus is going to be this coming week up through Friday, April 11th. That is when committees will be putting together their overall omnibus bills. And that's when we'll really get a look at what made it through the process and both budgetary and narratives. So today I'm just going to mention a few more that are in play. And then next week we will do a much more comprehensive written update as well as video updates. So just a note quick to say that now all of the governor's budget and policy bills have been heard. And when you go to our bill tracker at Child Careware Minnesota's website, you will see those on the first page. And I talked about those a bit more last week. So it's primarily our items are in either the Department of Children, Youth, and Families budget or a few things in the education budget. But those have made it through the process and will be included. Elements of, we will see if they are included in the final omnibus bills. So I'm just going to talk about some member introduced bills that were heard. First of all, the House Workforce and Labor Committee did a child care day of sorts with a few bills that have been referred to them. It started with the presentation on what's happening in the childcare workforce. So Scott Marquardt from the Southwest Initiative Foundation and Erica Moss representing Minbell, and then Darielle Dannon from Economic Development, all talked about their perspectives on the workforce. It was a great presentation to get a sense of what's happening. 3 bills were heard and laid over for consideration. The first, House File 2582, Representative Lee. This would be some additional childcare improvement grants, and specifically these are the grants that have been going out through First Children's Finance until recently at least, and facility improvements. Hopefully those will continue. And then they also added an amendment to put some additional funding into the grants that have traditionally been put out the door by deed, which also get at not only facility but other uses in building and supporting childcare. So that bill was heard and laid over. House File 2518, Representative Katiza Watoon. That is additional funding for Women Venture. That was heard a couple of weeks ago in the Senate. And this is funding to expand both their reach and some of what they are doing. And then there's a new bill also from Representative Katiza Watoon. At the time it was heard, it had not been officially introduced yet, so it had to be an informal hearing, but it's now House File 2994. And this is an interesting bill to create a pilot for child care, specifically for police officers and first responders in Hennepin County. And it's based on something I believe from San Diego, where this was done, where there's additional funding and support for those audiences. And this would also pass through Women Venture. So that was heard informally, but with the intention, I believe, of being laid over for consideration. And finally, House File 2266, Representative Sensor Mura. And this is additional funding for the YWCA grant. They have been doing a CDA training for many years now, and this is additional funding to help them sustain that. And also included an amendment that would focus specifically on getting some of the teachers who work in early childhood and childcare into the early learning scholarships. So there are teachers who are on the waiting list who can't work in childcare because their own child can't get childcare. So interesting bill. So those 4 bills, I guess 5 really, if you count the one that was introduced later, are up for consideration in the House Workforce and Labor Committee. The, of course, bulk of the action last week was in the House Children and Families Committee. So we had House File 470, which is the additional funding for early learning scholarships. In the House, it's carried by Representative West. As noted before, the funding for the early learning scholarships is slated to go down pretty significantly this coming year. So this is an effort to keep it whole. Also, Representative Katiza Watoon reintroduced and presented her bill, House File 1383, which is the Great Start Scholarship Bill. This was something that got discussed a lot last year, and this is an attempt to move toward having no family pay more than 7% of their income on childcare. So it gets us up into the what would be considered more middle class income levels, but still offering some relief for people who need to afford childcare. House File 2732 was Representative Purcell. That's a grant program for rural childcare, very rural. So there were several different intersecting sectors there. It's very rural, very small, high poverty, so a more limited audience, and it would basically build on top of the Great Start Compensation Support Program with some additional funding if a childcare program was in one of those areas that met all those qualifications. And the final funding bill was House File 2728. This was Representative Coulter. And another twist on the Great Start Compensation Support Programs, this would slightly expand the uses. So right now it is tied directly to the number of hours someone works in the classroom with children. What this bill would do is modify that to also include time spent in training and professional development or curriculum development. So a little bit more in the way of allowable uses. And finally, there were two more bills dealing with licensing and regulation. House File 2643, Representative West. And this is a bill that would indicate whether someone's childcare maltreatment or any really notification had been self-reported or was reported externally. And I believe I mistakenly attributed that language to last week's bill, House File 2305. That was about posting of conditional licenses, but this is about, again, indicating whether something was self-reported. And then finally, House File 1897. This is also around posting on the website, on the licensing lookup, and dealing with trying to offer some modifications to correction orders. First of all, offering more due process, and also talking about when that does or doesn't get posted on the licensing lookup. So you might want to look at House File 2643, House File 2305 from last week, or this one, House File 1897 for more details. Some of these technical bills are hard to explain in a couple of minutes. Finally, two more committees, not Children and Families. The Senate Education Finance Committee did hear Senate File 3128 from Senator Kunesh. And this is a long-standing program, long-standing bill of hers to continue to look at the Increased Teachers of Color Act. So this has been a movement around for a long time to do pretty much what you would think it sounds like. We're trying to expand, in this case, K-12 teachers to better represent the student body and the population. And this would be another effort to make something permanent. There was a scholarship pilot last year for aspiring teachers of color, and that was due to end because it was one-time money, and this would be an effort to continue that scholarship. And then finally, in the House Agriculture Committee, House File 1795 with Representative Nelson. And this is additional funding again that was, I believe, slated to drop. And this is for farm to school and early care and education programs. And a lot of interesting testimony from farmers who've found that beneficial, not only because of course, it helps them, but the ways in which they can connect with young children about farming and food. So that was also laid over. So we are through our list for now of some of the policy bills that were heard. So as I mentioned, next week or the week you'll be watching this up through April 11th, that is the crunch time when they will be putting together these omnibus budget bills. The only two that aren't required to be done by the 11th are the tax bill and then the bonding bill. Those happen a little later in session. But we should come out of this week with a sense of what's going to happen, or at least be on the table in both the House and the Senate. And of course, they'll look different in terms of children, youth, and families, health and human services, education, some of the areas that that fund us. So that's it. The week after that, the legislature goes on break. So we will use that week to dig in, do some analysis, let you know what's happening, and watch for another lengthy report, hopefully increasingly in writing, after this week. Thanks so much for tuning in again. Take care.